So thank you everyone for joining us today. Good afternoon, and it's great to see so many people on the line today joining us. The time's now 1 o'clock, and we'll begin our guest speaker series session. My name is Tim Hawley, and I'm part of the team here at JCIC Asset Management, supporting the client experience, and we're thrilled to have you. I'll be the host and moderator for today's call, and I'm absolutely so delighted to have Marilyn Hintsa from Uleadu Retirement Coaching join us today to discuss a future state of mind, why it's hard to envision the rest of your life, and how to get better at it. Something certainly I've been looking forward to. Marilyn will be talking more about her background during this session, so I won't go into that in too much detail. But I've had a chance to speak with her and get to know her a little better. And what really stands out for me is her passion to help people and navigate their next phase of life and be that thinking partner for them. And I think now more than ever, it's great to have someone like Marilyn on our side and helping us navigate through those complexities. I personally have been looking forward to the call. I think it's such an important part of the life planning process, and it really complements all the efforts that we put into the retirement planning on the investment side. And if you have some questions along the way, I did mention you'll be in listen only mode. If you have questions, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. Please ask away, and we'll attempt to get them answered as we go. If we don't, you have Marilyn's contact information in there. Feel free to reach out with her, and but we'll do our best to get to those questions. So Marilyn, welcome. Great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tim and JCIC, for having me here today. I can't see any of the audience. Is it possible to change that, or is this the way you do it?
Yeah, this is the typical setup. So
Okay,
apologies. Yeah.
if I wanted to get some interaction from the audience at some point, can you manage that for me?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So I hope by the end of this hour that you will all come away with something that a few ideas that you can chew on for a little while and that will maybe help you. And perhaps you'll have experienced a little bit of a change in perspective. And in that spirit, I invite you now to activate your curiosity. This discussion, as Tim said, is called a future state of mind, and it's going to hit on the following points. Future mindedness, what is it? And why is it important when navigating change and life transitions like retirement? And secondly, why the vast majority of us, simple humans, aren't actually very good at being future minded or consistently keeping our future self in mind when we act in the present. And then we'll finish up with a few tips on how we can all get better at being more future-minded and committed to our future selves. Now, I've got a couple of Zoom polls that I would like to run with you. So I'm going to ask Tim to launch them. The first poll asks, at what point in the future you believe your life will have become significantly different from what it is today? So if you could put in your response on the poll and hit submit. And Tim, you'll tell me when you've gotten lots of responses and we can switch to seeing the results.
I will. They're calculating. We have 17 of 19, just waiting
Yay.
for two more, 18, 19. We have full.
Great. So this is interesting. I would have expected fewer people in the 10 and 20 year range and perhaps more in the 5-year range, but that's, so we've got a group of people here who don't expect their life to change too much in the next 5 years, a large group of you that are forecasting into 10 years, and some of you even thinking it's going to be 20 years before your life changes dramatically. Since I can't see you and I don't know what your ages are, that might explain some of this too. Okay, so now let's go with the second poll. And this second poll asks, how clear is your vision of that significantly different life you'll be living in the future? And my list is a little bit cheeky, but I hope that you can sort it out and find the response that works for you.
And we're tabulating. We're at 6 of 7, 19. I think this is the more descriptive poll, so I'm intrigued with the answers here. We're at 19 of 19, and I'll share the results.
Great. Oh, okay. This does not surprise me that much. And it really confirms that idea that, a lot of us have not thought so much about the future. So we've got very few of you who are crystal clear on what that's going to be. It's great to see that a bunch of you, maybe the majority of you, are in the blurry part of this. That means that there's something there that you're envisioning. And the fog is beginning to lift. That's good too. And the fact that it's really foggy and you really can't see, you can see very little, is also not surprising and not something to be awfully worried about. And I'm really glad to see that there's nobody here who has absolutely no clarity and is completely in the dark. So probably by the end of this session, your answers to this will not have changed. But as you think about what we've talked about today, perhaps you will see some changes. And unfortunately, I can't tell whether the people who are crystal clear or a bit blurry are also the people who responded that their life will be changing sooner rather than later. Okay. So thank you, Tim. So now I know a little bit about you as a group. Let me tell you a little bit about me. So I am not the original thinker on this thing called future mindedness. I'm actually extrapolating from the work done in this area in the early 2000s by Dr. Martin Seligman, who some of you may recognize as the father of positive psychology. And he feels that future mindedness is closely tied to the idea of positive psychology. I've also brought in some ideas about how we can think outside the brain, which I gathered from a book called The Extended Mind by Annie Murphy Paul. And I applied them to thinking about the future. Really, they can be applied to thinking about anything. Now, the truth is, I've spent most of my life being proudly present-minded, with very little disciplined effort into planning the future, my future. But at this point in my life, and I will say that this is my post-retirement career, my encore career, as some people call it, I'm realizing that because of that, I missed out on things that, I wish I had done when I was younger, fitter, all of those things that you might be when you're a bit younger. And that I wish I had given more consideration to my future self in handling things like my financial affairs. I don't think that's an uncommon thing that arises for people. Not to suggest that I am now living this life of regret. I am not. It's been a really exciting and wonderful journey so far. And I'm looking forward to the rest of it being just as great. But I know that for the rest of this journey, I need to be more future-minded so that I can keep maximizing the present. So what's my interest in this idea of future-mindedness? Well, as Tim said, I am a retirement readiness or reset coach, depending on which side of that transition you're on. And I work with people who know they want to take advantage of the possibilities and opportunities of retirement, but don't know exactly what that looks like for them. So we work on the non-financial side of retiring, and the possibilities are endless for people. But what they don't have is a clear vision of where they want to go. So my interest in future mindedness really comes from wanting to find new tools for my clients and for me to help us connect with our futures so that we can see a clearer path forward and then start to walk that path. And what I hope to achieve today is to share what I've learned and understand so far about future mindedness, and perhaps inspire you to try to get better at being future-minded for your own sake and the sake of others, like your children and your grandchildren, or their children and their grandchildren, and others that are important to you, and also, generally globally. I also hope you'll start to see that future-mindedness is actually a handy skill with some real benefits, including helping us to see greater possibilities for ourselves, helping us to be more committed to acting with the future in mind, especially as we age, providing comfort by giving us a sense of direction, creating a sense of direction, and potentially making us more open and resilient to change. And given the world situation, who knows what's coming next, right? I also want to acknowledge, since this is being hosted by JCIC Asset Management, that bringing a clear vision of the future we want to our financial planning helps us and our advisors to do everything that's possible to ensure that we can live our vision. I hope I'm right about that, Tim.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Marilyn.
So a few logistics. I have a couple places in my presentation where I would like to stop and ask you for your thoughts. And if you have any comments, and Tim has already said that, or questions that arise at any time, I invite you to put them in the Q&A box or note them down for yourself so you don't forget. And I will do my best to address them in the Q&A at the end. And if anything I say today motivates you to want to connect with me later to continue a conversation about this topic, I have put my information in the chat. And if you'd like me to contact you, because that would be easier, please do the same and include the letters GIT in your message, and that will confirm for me that you want to get in touch. So let's jump in. And I want to start by inviting you to participate in a brief meditative exercise in order to get present in the moment so that we can perhaps attempt a short leap into a future state of mind. If you want, you can, well, I can't see you anyway, so you don't need to turn your cameras off. Let's begin. So I'm going to ask you to bring yourself to a comfortably seated, erect, or standing position. And if you're sitting and it's possible for you, bring yourself to the front of your chair so that your back is self-supported and you can feel your sit bones against the chair seat. Have your feet flat on the floor, a comfortable width apart, hip width apart, and your hands palms up on your thighs or in your lap. And if you are standing, just let your hands relax at your sides. And close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. And I'm first going to ask you to bring your attention to your breath. Your in-breath and your out-breath. Don't change it, just observe it for a moment. And now take a deep, relaxing breath through your nose, all the way down to your belly. And exhale it slowly, but without control, through your mouth. And let's do that one more time. In through your nose, down to your belly, exhale slowly through your mouth. And now return to your normal breathing. Now bring your attention to the soles of your feet and imagine them softening, melting into the floor, releasing all their tension to the floor. And breathe. Now bring your attention to the palms of your hands and breathe softness into the palms of your hands. Feel your fingers perhaps uncurl a bit. Maybe your wrists relax a bit. Next, notice the corners of your eyes, the inside corners and the outside corners, and soften the corners of your eyes. Maybe your eyelids feel heavier. Perhaps your forehead softens a bit. And finally, bring your attention to the space between your ears. And imagine breathing into that space and softening it. Maybe you feel your jaw drop a bit and your lips part slightly. And breathe. Give your attention back to your breath as I invite you now to imagine that you've time traveled to Thursday, March 22nd, 2028, 5 years from today. Imagine looking around at your surroundings in this new time. What's the same? What's different? Do you see yourself? How have you changed? What are you doing? Who's with you, if anyone? What would you like to ask your future self? I'm going to be quiet for just a little while now, and I want you to let your imagination continue exploring this future and welcome whatever comes into your mind without judgment, and you can engage with it rather than just letting it pass by. So take a final look at the future that you've imagined for yourself. And if you feel to, maybe embrace your future self. And now let's take a deep, energizing breath through the nose and exhale it again without control, but this time through your nose. And do that again if you want to. And when you're ready to open your eyes and join us back in this space, please do so. Now I have a question for you. How was that? And I don't know, Tim, if you can see any smiles or nods or expressions on the people attending. I'm really curious, though, if any of you were able to imagine and connect with your future self. I can't ask you for a thumbs up because I can't see you, but maybe you could put something in the Q&A that says, yeah, that was an interesting experience and something happened there. And I
Yeah,
don't know, Tim, can we ask anyone if they'd be willing to come off mute and share?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone would like to share their experience, and typically what I do is ask for emojis in the Q&A or into the chat to let people know how you're feeling. And I think it's a great experience to kind of open up your mind to see kind of the possibilities, right? I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So Sandra's she's felt really real and energizing. Ideally, we could do this every day at 1 o'clock. I think that would be a great exercise. So thanks for sharing, Sandra.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on then. So what is this thing called future mindedness? Well, future mindedness is the same thing as prospection, which it turns out is obviously the opposite of retrospection. So at its core, future mindedness is really just the ability to think about the future. But this ability to contemplate the future is sort of a superpower. The fact that we can think beyond tomorrow and bring such complexity to the futures that we conjure is really a uniquely human skill. And some people think it's one of the things that defines us as being human. And as you may have experienced in our quick time travel meditation, future mindedness involves an act of the imagination. So developing your imaginative powers is one of the keys to connecting with the future in a more compelling way. So why talk about something we all do anyway? Well, because as I said at the beginning, we aren't particularly good at prospection beyond a relatively short period of time. And I wonder how long that time is for you. Is it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? For most people, the future goes dark at 15 years. So why aren't we good at it? Well, one reason is conditioning. If you think about your lives at work, for example, they're probably driven and structured by the culture of your workplace. That for the most part, in most large organizations and even in small organizations, are more concerned about the next quarter than they are about the next 10 years. Now, I recognize that depending on your seniority, in the organization, you're going to have a different time horizon. So if you're the CEO, the president, the owner, a member of the C-suite, the board of directors, you're probably going to have a longer time frame that you're considering on a regular basis in your business than you would if you're the person at the front line dealing with the clients, right? But nonetheless, you're probably not thinking 10 years ahead, unless you are a truly, truly visionary leader. And that makes it difficult. So we've been conditioned to this relatively short-term time horizon in which we operate. And that makes it difficult to suddenly switch over to a longer-term view when we want to do something like envision our post-career life or our retirement, especially when we want to envision one that is uniquely for us. And then if we add to that conditioning, we also live in a culture right now that really drives us to incrementality. So think about it. One more thing on or off your bucket list. One more thing checked off your to-do list. One more view, follower, or comment on your favorite social media site. One more episode of a Netflix series. One more Netflix series. So you can see how there's so much in our society right now that really drives us in this incremental way, and there's many others. And all that daily incrementality really distracts us from giving more consideration to what we want over the longer term, over the course of our lives. The other thing, it turns out, that we're not very good at, and this is the really important thing, and that is consistently acting for the benefit of our future selves, either individually or as a collective. Sure, you can think of ways that that plays out, right? So let's find out what holds us back from doing that. Well, the very first thing, it turns out, is our brain. Not surprisingly, it's in control of everything that we do. And our brain's primary purpose is to keep us alive. So if you think back thousands of years to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they really needed to focus on the present, on their immediate impulses, in order just to survive. And they were constantly on the lookout for food and threats. And their brains evolved to be really good at that. And even though our brains have evolved a lot since then, allowing us to do all the amazing things that we have been able to do, we still retain our ancestors' tendencies through our brain's limbic system, sometimes called the lizard brain, that frequently overrides potential future rewards in favor of immediate ones or perceived threats. And sometimes that's a good thing. Add to that our brains really like to conserve energy. And the energy required to act reflexively in the moment is far, far less than that required to be contemplative, rational, or circumspect, the kinds of thing you need to do if you're thinking about the future. And this is woulda, coulda, shoulda territory, and I'm sure we're all intimately familiar with it. So these are things that we did or didn't do in the moment that we have somehow come to regret or wish we hadn't, or, we ponder them and think, what was the matter with me? But of course, there's also a good side to this. And it's part of how we learn from experience. We learn, I'm never going to do that again, right? Now, I don't want to suggest for 1 second that we become so earnest about the future that we forget to enjoy the present and what's available to us right now here in real life, because this is where we're living and there is a lot to enjoy. It's about balance, like everything else, and getting greater clarity around our choices. Because we always, if we have nothing else, we always have choices. Can I do a time check, Tim? How are we doing? I can't hear you.
Apologies. Yeah, we're doing really well and had a great comment
Great.
from Aaron, just really related to a lot of what you're saying. And I thought I'd just add some commentary myself.
Sure.
It's
Thanks.
so interesting. What I'm learning already is, we're a society that wants everything immediately, and we want the, Marilyn, what's the answer to this question immediately, not over, half hour. And it really is a journey within ourselves, and to set that stage first is ever so important. And I really like the way you started the call. So I've already learned that. I thought that was very introspective. That's already happening inside myself. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So just one more thing about our brain and choice. So between any stimulus and response, there's a tiny, tiny little gap, and choices happen in that gap. And the gap is where you get to make, is where you get to challenge your own brain's auto response to whatever that stimulus was. However, if we don't know what our choices are, because we don't have a clear vision of the path ahead, or we're unaware that we're stuck in old patterns that maybe don't serve us anymore, it's possible that even if we think about it and take advantage of that gap, our next move might not be the best one. And just a plug for coaching here, those old patterns that may no longer serve us is one of the things that coaches help clients recognize and change what they are. So if you've been coached, you know that absolutely 100%. So what else is holding us back from acting for our future selves? Well, it's this combination of sort of optimism and skepticism. The future is just an idea that we conjure, as you've learned. And regardless of the data that goes into that idea, we can't see it, touch it, smell it, hear it. So it's never going to be as real or as compelling as our present or our experienced past. And even when we have really good science with powerful data and it shows us where we're headed, most of us find it inconceivable. I'm thinking of climate change here. Until something like massive wildfires or floods make the possibilities of what's coming visceral to us. And even then, if those events aren't in our backyard, many of us continue to believe it's happening somewhere else. It's not going to happen to us. We might even, in a sort of boy cried wolf kind of way, come to mistrust well-founded predictions if too often they don't actually come true. Or when they do come true, they're not as bad as everybody said they were going to be. This is our relationship with our weather forecasters. And that tells us, oh, we can handle things when they come. It'll be okay. So that's optimistic and hopeful, which is really good. So again, this is not all bad, because if we didn't have this little bit of optimism and hope combined with some skepticism, we'd probably be, in the fetal position, paralyzed with worry and fear all the time about the future. And we're not, which is a good thing. But by not paying attention, by thinking it's not going to be as bad as everybody says it's going to be, or by saying it's not going to happen to us, we're preventing ourselves from taking some steps that will make us more resilient to whatever does come in the future. And again, it's a balance. And each of us has to find the balance that's right for us in terms of preparing and being ready. And it's not just climate change. There's a whole bunch of other things that this applies to as well. So I have a question for the group. And again, I don't know if anybody is willing to come off mute and share, but I'm curious if anyone could share what they feel holds them back from being more future-minded and acting for the benefit of your future self, or alternatively, what drives you to be future-minded and connected to what your future self needs you to do. I can't hear you, Tim.
If you do submit to the Q&A panel, it is only seen by myself. So feel free to submit any observations.
Please. I would love it if somebody would come off mute, because then I get a chance not to talk. However, I understand. Are we getting anything in the Q&A?
So we do have a submission here. Being too busy prevents future mindedness.
It sure does. Yeah, absolutely. There was something interesting on the CBC this morning on The Current. A woman has written a book where she talks about time and how if we can change our perspective of time, it'll also change our perspective of the future. So I'm going to be buying that book, which I now can't remember the name of, but if you're a current listener, perhaps you heard it as well.
Yeah, and someone has asked to repeat the question, and I'll admit that I need it repeated as well. Could you give it to us one more time, please?
Sure. Well, there were two questions, really.
Okay.
So what do you feel holds you back from being more future-minded and acting for the benefit of your future self is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is what drives you to be future-minded and connected to what your future self might need.
So we have a submission here, which I completely relate to. Having the current bills/situations to worry about and the future still seems so far away.
Yeah. Totally get that. Yeah, it's our day-to-day lives, really. We're busy people, right? And again, that's partly a cultural thing.
And so I guess my observation, and I'll voice it, is it paradoxical that we sometimes can't see the future for focusing too much on today when we need to look at today to be mindful of the future? Or am I going a step too far? I'll leave that comment for now. We do have another comment. I tend to get caught up in the day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you are trying to envision a future using your imagination, and I will talk more about that, you need to take time away from that day-to-day distraction and spend some quality time, just as you take time away, some people do, to meditate in the mornings or go to the gym or all those other things that are good for us, right?
Yeah, we have another. Sorry, Marilyn. Another
no,
observation here, which I really like. Current time commitments seem to occupy so much of a week. There's seldom time to break away, and clearly it's about priorities.
Very good point. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes thinking about the future isn't our top priority, and sometimes that's an age thing. We're young, we think we're immortal, and we'll figure it out 30 years down the road. But as we get older and we've got less time on this earth, if you want, as I said at the beginning, to maximize your present, then at this time of life, I think that starting to think more clearly about the future helps you do that. So our priorities just do change as we get older and our lives change.
And just as a reminder, we are recording this, so we will send out the recording because I feel I'll need to digest it 3 or 4 times. There's a lot of heavy stuff here, so it's making me look inside myself. A couple more observations, which if you don't mind, I'll share. Reading retirement books in preparation for retirement has encouraged me to be more future-minded. Now retired for 8 months, strong focus on now and near mid-future. And I think that's a great observation. Another one, I often get caught up in my daily life and my responsibilities, but I have a plan for my future and I never stop thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the other interesting thing, when you start planning and putting ideas into your brain about what you want to do, even if you're not constantly thinking about it, your brain is still working on it. And we all know that idea of when you think of something and everything else starts to expand when you focus on something. And so our brain is bringing things to our attention because they're related to that thing we just dropped back into our mind somewhere. And things start to cross our path that's related to that new thing that we're interested in. And I know we've all had that experience. I certainly have. We start thinking it's synchronicity, but really it's just our brain saying, hey, pay attention to this now.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
another submission here, sometimes taking the time to envision the future helps me to feel better about what I'm doing now
Mm,
and why I'm doing it.
mm.
Interesting. Yeah.
I love that motivation. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your feedback. So let's move along. Um, we've talked about why we're not good at this thing called future mindedness and acting on behalf of our future selves. But how do we actually think about the future? What's happening when we think about the future? And this is interesting and counterintuitive at the same time, because what we do is we remember the future. And what that means is that we arrange bits and pieces of our memory to create, i.e., envision, a possible future. Because all we have is what we know, right? And the memories that we access to do this aren't just the things that we've experienced directly. They could also be books we've read, movies we've seen, um, stories other people have told us, the media, the news. All of that goes into our brain as some kind of memory. And the more emotion that we have associated with anything in our brain, the more likely it's going to pop up when we need it. But luckily, we don't have to remember the exact details of those memories. All we need is a little gist of them for them to start showing up in our visions. And a little bit of a side note, you know, often when people think of retirement, they're swayed by everything they've been told or witnessed about retirement, including all those very old Freedom 55 ads with people on their sailboats and at the golf course or the resort or whatever. And we start thinking that doing retirement right, is doing it like that. But like that might not be right for you. So you may need more information, different information, to broaden your idea of the best retirement for you in order to see other possibilities. And I'm sure you all realize that that's true. Of course, this rearranging of our memories is again an act of imagination. And the magic, the creativity, if you will, happens when we connect all these disparate memories and ideas and beliefs in new ways and discover insights in the process. This is how innovation happens. This is how creativity happens. And I will again put in a plug for coaching, because coaches love it when this happens for our clients. And it's kind of the aha moment that we live for, right? Okay, I see we're doing pretty well for time. So if that's how we think about the future, how do we get better at remembering the future? Well, the first way is the same way that you get to play at Carnegie Hall. Practice, 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 assuming you know that old joke. And what are you going to practice? Something that some of us may find really hard: daydreaming. And I'm going to guess that a fair number of you out there at some point in your life have been told or have told somebody else, stop daydreaming, get back to work. Daydreaming has kind of a bad rap in our society. You know, there's all these movies about people who fail to launch because they're daydreaming all the time. But I'm going to suggest that you try to change your mindset around this activity and make it a habit. Regularly and frequently give your imagination the freedom to roam. And in doing so, you will make those magical creative connections that bring insight and new ideas. But to do this, you do have to detach yourself from the task at hand. So combining daydreaming with a meditation like we did earlier, or another really good alternative, an aimless wander, preferably in nature, can be really helpful. I just want to elaborate a little bit about aimlessness. This is a fun fact. So it turns out that the speed at which you walk will determine whether you can, in fact, daydream effectively. And there was a Japanese researcher who used himself as a study subject. And he tried to determine at what speed he was best suited to daydreaming. And he discovered that if he's, walking for fitness, power walking, or just, really focused on fitness while he's walking, that daydreaming doesn't work with that. He also discovered that if he was walking to go somewhere because he had something to do, like go to the bank or shop or visit somebody, that that caused him to walk a little bit more quickly, and his mind was generally on the goal. And so that too was not really great for daydreaming. So I'm guessing that the speed of walking is going to be unique to everybody. For me, it's, not a really slow walk. It's a comfortable walk. And that I do try and make it aimless. It's hard in our society to walk aimlessly for nothing, right? But it's one way to daydream. And I will admit that that is the way I find most helpful to me, that I can get lost in my thoughts as I'm walking in nature. Now, if anxiety or worry comes up while you do this, then you can just stop. Or you can switch to daydreaming about how you would solve the thing that's causing you worry or anxiety, or how you would prepare to deal with that thing if it arose. And that way you're actually doing something to benefit your future self, right? So I can't ask you to raise your hand because I can't see you, but I'm going to ask you how often you find yourself daydreaming. Maybe you can just drop something in the Q&A, like, frequently, never, always, some length of time. You're muted, Tim.
Oh, see, I'm daydreaming already. That's a great question. I find I daydream at the worst times when I'm driving.
Right.
So we've got some comments rolling in, and thanks everyone for the comments. It's great to see. We have a seldom, daily, usually when walking the dog, multiple times daily.
That's awesome.
On the GO train, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm on that as well. And we have another one here, frequently. And I guess what I'm taking from this is it's good, it's healthy, it's okay
Yes.
to daydream. And just hearing that is revolutionary for maybe someone like myself. We get into a rigid state, and we feel that maybe we're off task, we're off course, and with daydreaming and allowing ourselves to expand our thoughts and go into that. Um, and when potentially when we're under the an influence of sorts, we tend to daydream.
Fair enough. Well, I'm really happy to hear that so many of you are frequent daydreamers, because many people are not. And just another fun fact, studies have shown that daydreamers spend more time thinking about the future than non-daydreamers. And daydreams are about the future around 43% of the time. So, as you daydream going forward, just check in. Am I thinking about the future? What am I thinking about? Right?
And so we have a little more submission here. When I feel
Yeah.
I can take some time. So when I feel I can take some time. Now, is that should we be permitting ourselves more frequently to be doing that? That's starting to sound like myself. I'm not permitting myself to take that time.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's giving yourself permission. And even if it is on the GO train, rather than thinking, oh, here I am daydreaming again, I should be reading a book or the news on my phone or something like that, no, you don't. You don't have to do
Yeah.
that.
And apologies, it was just corrected. When I feel I can take some me time. So
There you go. Okay.
permitting, I was the
Yes.
example of the other way, so it's
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
relevant.
Absolutely, me time. Well, and I wholeheartedly believe that taking me time is an important thing in our lives, and if you spend some of that doing some daydreaming, then that's amazing too. I would love to ask you all if you're in creative jobs, and that's why daydreaming is part of your normal life. So let's see, where are we here? Yeah, so another way that we can get better at this remembering the future, and I touched on this earlier, is if you need more information, remember those Freedom 55 ads and our idea of what doing retirement right might be. You might just have to add stuff to your data bank, your brain's data bank. And so exposing yourself to lots of different experiences to give you more to draw on when you daydream is a great thing to do. And it's never too late to do that. And those experiences could be things you do, things you listen to, books you read, with new ideas and stuff you never thought about before, like this webinar. You've probably never thought about half of the things I'm saying. So exposing yourself to those different things also builds your data bank and gives you more to draw on. So to me, that means saying yes when an opportunity to do something you've never done before is suddenly presented to you. And your brain might be saying, I don't want to do that. No, you don't want to do that. Stop. Ignore that. Go ahead and do it, because all you're going to lose is a little bit of time, theoretically, unless it's a week-long, adventure. And it might turn out really well, and you'll really enjoy it, and it'll be a new interest for you. Another way that we can get better at creating a really compelling vision of the future for ourselves is to make it very, very vivid. And what that means is bringing as much detail as you can while daydreaming to your daydreams so that they become alive for you in the present. And a couple of options for this. One of them is to see it in real life. And a couple ways that you can do that, you can create vision boards, which is basically collaging. If you're, an artist and you paint or you sketch or you sculpt, you can try painting your vision of the future. You can sketch your vision of the future or sculpt your vision of the future. And those creative acts of putting your future in real life will also spark more creativity and bring more to your vision in general. Another way, and I haven't done this and I don't know anyone who has, but I really like this idea, is you can hear your vision. And so this is giving your future a soundtrack and bringing your sense of hearing into it. And that soundtrack could be evocative music. Say you want, to be doing a lot of traveling in your future. So you could bring in music from the places that you want to travel to. Maybe you want to learn an instrument. So you want to listen to music being played with that instrument. It could also be environmental sounds if you want to spend more time in nature. And maybe it depends where that nature is. Like if you want to move to Costa Rica, maybe sounds of the jungle in Costa Rica is what you should be listening to as you think about your future there. And it could even be talking. Again, maybe you want to travel, you want to learn another language. So listening to people talk in those languages might be something that inspires you in some way. Or it could just be people talking because you want to build new relationships and make new friends at some point in the future. Maybe when you leave work and you've left your professional network behind and you need to do something to build up a different kind of network. So these ideas of making your vision compelling helps to create excitement and other emotions around what you're envisioning. And it's those emotions that will really connect you with your vision and motivate you more strongly towards it. So if you envision something and there's very little emotion around it, you probably need to work on it a bit more. And you might even have to go back to the drawing board. Tim.
Wonderful. So I think we're just kind of rounding third base here.
Okay.
Did you want to, actually we have, let me see, I have a great observation by someone in the group here. Someone has set up in the last 2 years a retirement activity jar. They dropped notes and ideas as they came to us. and now it's pretty full, and had a lot of fun discussing the ideas as they arose. They haven't
Awesome.
opened it yet, and might take your idea and create a collage with the ideas. I think
Yeah.
that's a fantastic, wonderful idea. I think it's amazing foresight to put that together in the first place. So
Mhm.
congratulations on that. I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely, I agree. You said we're rounding the third base here. I've got a couple of other things. Do we have time to cover them, or do you want to go to more of the
Sure,
Q&A?
sure, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay. So another way to connect with your future and connect with your future self. We did this a little bit in the little meditative journey that we did earlier, where I asked if you were able to see your future self. And if you did, what did you look like? It's important to understand that we continue to grow and develop to our last breath. Some people don't quite get that. And they did some studies at one point where they asked people, can you tell us what's changed for you in the last 10 years? And people will tell, a whole bunch of things that have changed over the last 10 years. And then they ask them, well, okay, so what's going to change in the next 10 years? And a lot of them go, oh, not much. And that's probably true the older we get, because we think, well, we're grown up now. Like, I'm not going to change that much in the next while. But in fact, you're going to change just as much in the next 10 years as you changed in the last 10 years. So creating a relationship with your future self needs you to recognize that that's true. And why would you want to do this? What matters about this? Well, again, other studies have shown that if you have this close relationship with your future self, you will find it easier to act today for the benefit of that person. And there's a couple ways that you can see yourself in the future. And one of them is something called the Aging Booth, and it's an app. You can download it on your phone. You upload a selfie, and it will age it 30 years. So I did this. This was probably about a year and a half ago that I did this. And here's the result. This is me, apparently 30 years from now. I think she looks pretty good. I don't know what you think. Anyways, when I first saw this picture, it kind of scared me. But now when I look at it, I see my mother and my eldest brother looking back at me. And because of that, I feel love towards this person. And I want to care for them. And I want to be this when I'm 30 years older, with those bright eyes and that smile. And apparently still living in my same apartment, but maybe that won't be true. Anyway, so that's one way of doing it. Another way, if you don't want to load your selfie into an app, you can commune with people who are older than you. Maybe you have older siblings, your parents, maybe still your grandparents, and try to be curious with them about how they have changed as they've aged. What's been different for them? And ask them in a way that's compassionate and empathetic, because as you practice compassion and empathy towards them, you may also be able to practice compassion and empathy towards your future self. Again, strengthening that relationship with who you're going to become. So one last thing, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, because I know I've dumped a lot on you. So another way to get better at thinking about the future, and I referred to this also at the beginning with the book called The Extended Mind, that talks about how we can think outside our brain. And one of them is to let your physical body into the party when you are thinking. And that aimless walking in nature is one of those, let me bring my physical body into this. And if you are truly walking aimlessly and you're not constantly looking around you and trying to see things as you're going, that will actually relax your brain, free up resources that it would otherwise need if you were navigating a city street, for instance. And by freeing up those resources, it opens your brain to new things to do, make those creative connections, right? Another thing you could do is you could verbalize your vision. And if you're somebody who thinks better while talking, you might just want to go into a room and talk to yourself. Perfectly reasonable thing to do. You can also share your vision with someone else. And again, this would force you to verbalize it, and get their brain working alongside yours. And if you have a partner, That might be the person that you want to do this with. Because multiple brains are generally better than one. And it will also expand that database of experiences that you can draw on, because now it's not just your database, but it's this other person's database as well. And finally, journaling. And you can either just journal for the sake of capturing the ideas that come up for you, or you can do something called stream of consciousness journaling, which is really just taking time, preferably first thing in the morning, just to start writing and not worry about, proper sentences or spelling or anything. Just sort of spill out what's coming out of your brain at that moment. It's a good stress reliever, but it also contributes to creativity. And so it will support your daydreaming. So that's all I got today. And just a quick recap. We've talked about future mindedness and the vital link between it and acting today for your future benefit. We've covered what holds us back from longer term thinking and acting on behalf of our future selves. And we've looked at how we think about the future, i.e. we remember it. And then we got a few strategies at the end there that we can deploy to get better at this thing called future mindedness. Tim, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great summation. And yeah, just in my thinking, I tend to verbalize as I'm daydreaming. So I'm taking care of a couple of things
Yay.
at the same time. And I think you've started the discussion, right? I think that's the interesting part is the session today is started us getting us thinking. And maybe that's the great first step and getting to those corners of the brain that we sometimes don't know how to get into or we're reluctant to get into. So
Sure.
we'll wrap it up with that. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you join us and just give us something different in the first quarter of this year. Some of those deeper insights in navigating the stage of our lives. Very informative. I have a ton of takeaways myself. Again, you have contact information if you want to get a hold of Marilyn afterwards and continue the journey. The coordinates are in the chat below there. And just as well, not a preview, but what's coming up in April will be our back to our quarterly webinar. The invitation will be going out in the first week of April. It will be hosted by our very own Michelle Durant, and we'll share some economic insights into the first quarter of 2023 and what that means to us as investors. So thank you all for joining us today. Please feel free to share these invitations with your friends, family members. We're here to help everyone live the good life, and we're thrilled to be able to bring excellent resources like Marilyn to everybody. If there's a topic that you'd like to hear more about, or maybe something that Marilyn's mentioned today, please contact me directly at the email or number on the invitation. And please let me know, and we'll be happy to do that for you. So again, thank you all for taking the time out of your day. We've enjoyed having you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So on behalf of JCIC Asset Management, thank you very much, Marilyn. It's been a real pleasure having you, and thank you all to everyone joining, and we'll conclude the call there. So thank you.
And I just want to say, I want to thank you for inviting me, and also for the rest of you for giving me your kind attention today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yes, thank you very much, everybody. Okay, have a wonderful day.